Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage of Milo Edwards.
Hello, I'm doing well. Yeah. Fantastic. My name is Milo Edwards. This show is called Pindos, which is a Russian slang term meaning the American. I'm aware that I sound like this. We're gonna get to that. I have a theory. The theory is this. You can fundamentally change the meaning of any sentence in any language with 2 words or less. For example, consider the sentence, hello, my name's Milo Edwards and I am famous in Russia. In Russia are the 2 most important words in that fucking sentence. They entirely change what's going on. Because I think we're all familiar with the concept of being famous in the West, you know, like riches, women, whatever. Being famous in Russia is slightly different, okay? It's a lot more like being a hot girl in the West. Doesn't really do anything for your career necessarily. You do get a lot of creepy messages on Instagram. That's what I'm working with. I spent 3 years living in Moscow, and as a result of that, okay, I have a favorite place in Moscow, and it's called the Cosmonaut Museum. Anyone been there? What? Couple of people? Okay, right, okay. This bit's a lot of people. Fuck, if they sent a delegation. Oh, I could be in trouble. You're not going to like where this bit's going if you're from the Cosmonaut Museum. Look, for those of you who've not been, it's a lot like the Cape Canaveral NASA Museum in the US, right? If they had a budget of $10. It's fucking incredible. It's like an acid trip, but cheaper. There's papier-mâché shit in there. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. It's as though the Russians went, we went to space. Everyone knows we went to space. Fuck the museum. We spent all the money on space. I have a favorite exhibit in the Cosmonaut Museum. It's called Dogs in Space, and let me tell you, it does what it says on the fucking tin. Because, I'll break it down for you, okay? At the start of the Soviet Union, there had been 0 dogs in space. And uniquely among all the nations of the Earth, the Soviets looked at that particular stat as a fucking challenge. Every day it was like, Vitaly, what shall we do today? Shall we perhaps grapple with some of the grave socio-economic issues facing our vast and desperately underdeveloped country? It's like, no, don't be ridiculous. You see, I found these Labradors. And there is, as you know, space. We're going to be very busy, my friends. There will be no time for the roads, the schools, or the hospitals today. Or indeed at any point in the next 75 years. And what's fucking wild about the dogs in space, right, is every single dog they went to space, right, was a dog that they're like a stray dog that they got off the street. Now, the interesting implication of that is, if you were living in Moscow in the 1950s or 60s and you lost your dog, there was a genuine possibility that some motherfuckers had sent it into space in the name of communism. What a time in which to live! Incredible. Now, the first dog that went to space, she was called Laika. She died because of, not to get too technical, but basically there's this problem, which is that dogs aren't supposed to go to fucking space. It's like 2 things dogs can't have, chocolate and space. Ask any vet. Immediately after that, they sent 2 more dogs together, Belka and Strelka. Now, I don't know what the logic was behind that, but you have to admit that from an outside perspective, it sounds a lot like, okay, space, it seems you can kill 1 dog. But we have a question for you, my friend! What if 2 dogs? You know what's wild? Those 2 dogs came back alive. The Soviet Union successfully intimidated space. We will keep sending more dogs until you relent. We fear nothing. Absolutely crazy shit, right? So that's not how I ended up in Russia. I wasn't sent there by scientists. I ended up in Russia because I'm a linguist. I'm very interested in the things people say and the ways in which they say them, something which makes me a hit at parties. Thank you. I also studied ancient Greek at university, something else which makes me a hit at parties. There's one thing I learned from studying ancient Greek. It's that every language has a word which tells you everything you need to know about the people who spoke that language. In ancient Greek, the word is this word raffinado. Now, you're probably thinking, raffinado, what does that mean? Probably something ineffable and untranslatable from Plato about the very nature of our human condition. You are close. Raffinado, what it means is to insert a radish, which I think we can all agree is a very good start, into another man's anus. Now, people said to me, Milo, what are you studying ancient Greek for? You will never use that in your job. Look at me now. It's the only thing I use in my job from my education. Because that's an interesting little socio-political time capsule, right? Because, right, in English, okay, you can say the sentence, I put a radish in his anus, and you might get thrown out of pret-a-manger. But we do not have a word for it. The fact that the ancient Greeks had a word for it suggests that in ancient Greece, the act of putting a radish in another man's anus and then deciding to tell people about it was one of such banal, commonplace, everyday domesticity that they had to come up with a word, presumably to save time, on constantly saying the entire phrase, I put a radish in his anus. We've got to come up with something, Dicaiopoulos. We're losing entire afternoons to explaining all of the kind of fundament radish insertion that we're doing. Something must be done. Every language has a word like this. The Russian language has the word pizdyets. Now, pizdyets is very... Now, I'm going to loosely translate. Basically what pizdyets means is some fucked up shit, right? And it's very useful in Russia, partly because it's very flexible in its context. So, for example, you can say a sentence like, my grandmother was come home from shops, and she was killed and eaten by a pack of stray dogs. Pizdyets. But you can follow it up with something like, however, she left me reasonable money for inheritance, and I used this all for huge cocaine party with my friends. Pizdyet! Very comfortable with that grey area between good and bad. You have to be. The Russian language is kind of bent around the country of Russia, right? Like, once a Russian friend of mine was trying to explain to me what a niche Russian word that I didn't know meant. And what he said was, literally, well, Milo, you see it means like better, but in the sense that it was worse. A concept only the Russian mind could comprehend. You have to have lived there to understand what the fuck that means. But I do, because let me tell you, that may as well have been the motto of the Soviet Union. Things became much better in the sense that they were, in fact, significantly worse. Significantly worse, yeah. I was 22 years old when I moved to Russia. That's important, because it was a long time ago, right? I was 22, decided to move to Russia. This is what the Russians would call a midlife crisis. So, I decided... Like, the important thing, right, is to remember that it was 2015, okay? 2015, very different time. And, like, the reason why it was a different time is because, like, Russians were different then. How you think of Russians was different. Like, now, if you think of Russians, you're probably thinking of the war in Ukraine. Or slightly before that, you were probably thinking of the world's unluckiest tourists. You remember those guys, right? Chain Italian restaurant and cathedral enthusiasts who, by pure happenstance, would blunder into these international nerve gas assassination conspiracies. Dimitri, we were just trying to enjoy our gay honeymoon in this picturesque West Country town with its medieval steeple. And we have tripped and assassinated an enemy of the Russian state. How does this keep happening? We must speak with our travel agent. The Russian government was so pissed about that, man. They thought they had dumbest assassination of 2018 in the bag. And then the Saudi Arabian government was like, by Allah, hold my non-alcoholic beer. We are gonna dismember a famous journalist in our own embassy, on foreign soil, and then to prove that we didn't do it, we are gonna release video footage of him leaving the embassy. How are we going to do that if he's dead? Are we going to use a doppelganger or a disguise? No! We are going to use reversed footage of him walking into the embassy! Yeah! Look how alive that man is! He moonwalked out! He had a fantastic time in the Saudi embassy. He learned to dance. Yeah. 2015 was a very different time. Yeah, there's no Trump, no Brexit. David Cameron had only recently fucked a pig. It was a very different time for humanity. And so I showed up in Russia. I thought it would be a good idea to get a job working as a tutor for a very rich Russian family. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever done any tutoring, okay? But there are certain kind of vibes that different kinds of clients have. So if you're working for a rich English family, how it works is you kind of show up and they're like, oh, very good of you to come. Listen, a bit embarrassing, spot of bother. We appear to have had a stupid child. Can you please do something about it? Here's some gold our family acquired in South Africa, right? Rich Russian family is a very different vibe. So you show up at a rich Russian family and they're like, oh yes, very good of you to come. Listen, my son is received F in school for the last 5 years because he's troubled genius. You will get him into Oxford University in the next 6 weeks. He is 9 years old and speaks no English. Good luck. If you fail, I will kill you. Different approach, right? Different approach. Now this family, they had 2 drivers, which is 2 more than the normal number of drivers. Driver number 1, he was called Sasha, and Sasha carried a gun. And driver number 2, he was called Andre, and Andre carried a baffling series of misconceptions about the world and the way in which it works. Loved speaking to Andre. There was always much to learn. One day, Andre and I are having lunch, and he advances to me the opinion that he believes that eating any foreign food, more or less any food that isn't like boiled chicken, is in some way homosexual. And he said that to me as a man who was sat there in triple denim with a handlebar moustache. And now what I want to point out here is Andre was a pretty nice guy. Like I know he's coming over homophobic, but what you've got to realise is that Andre is a guy of almost 50 who's grown up in rural Russia, right? You may have ended up a bit homophobic in that scenario, because Andre watched a lot of Russian news. And I don't know if they still do this, but at the time on Russian news, they used to regularly refer to Europe as gay Europa. Yeah, don't get that on your liberal BBC, do you? Maybe tune in and find out the truth, okay? Yeah, Europe is gay Europa, right? Because in Europe, everyone is gay, and also Europe is run by Sharia law. No offense. Some people quicker on the uptake than others with that one. Yeah, and so basically the line is, we must take firm stance on Europe, because if we don't, the Europeans who are gay will come over to Russia with their Islamic homosexuality, and they will make Russia gay. Now, obviously that's insane, but what it is a war I'd fucking love to see. Fabulously dressed European soldiers fucking sweeping across the Baltic states, kicking in the door of some guy in Smolensk and make him light a scented candle and recite the Hadith. The future is now, old man! The European army is here to stay. I hope you like the halal taste of cock. Thank you. Yeah, I quit that job because the people I was working for were insane. And I remember the day that I quit because it was Vladimir Putin's birthday. The reason I remember that is because I celebrate it every year. The primary reason I remember it is because I was waiting to get picked up by a driver that day, and all I had to do was watch like Channel 1 Russian news. And there was only one news story that day, which was that Vladimir Putin, on his 63rd birthday, had chosen to celebrate by playing ice hockey for the Russian national ice hockey team, as any normal head of state would do. Now, allow me to set the scene for you. Blackout in the stadium. The players are on the ice. Spotlight comes on. God mic. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. He skates out onto the ice. Everyone goes fucking mental. People are throwing flowers, newborn children. Raise him as you're on, you will be strong. Putin's doing laps of the ice, blowing kisses to people. The game begins, and I'll level with you, I'm thinking, where are they going to go from here? We're already at an 11 out of 10. The energy in the room is insane. I tell you what, I lacked faith at that point because let me tell you, the game began and Vladimir Putin, on his 63rd birthday, scored 7 goals against professional ice hockey players who are 40 years younger than him. And you're watching that and you just think, what a hockey talent. What made him jack it in to become president of Russia? Could have been an Olympian. Maybe Vladimir Putin just didn't have very supportive parents. They were like, no, you will never be a hockey player. You will go and get a real job, like president of Russia. Country which actually does not yet exist. But eventually it will. Yeah, so I quit that job and I had to get another job, right? So I got a job working for a British company that sold financial services over the phone. Now, it's a bit like, imagine, okay, like Wolf of Wall Street, right? But Wall Street is like an office above a shopping centre in outer Moscow, and the wolf is a divorced guy from Maidenhead. While I was working at this company, I got to meet a lot of people I would describe as Brits abroad. Now, the thing about Brits abroad is you kind of leave Britain to find out how bad some of our exports are, because it turns out that our chief export is not Marmite. No. We are actually the world's leading producer of cunts. The Australians had us going for a bit there, but we have stepped up production. We have levelled up. British cunts outnumber Australian cunts 3-1 in every major European city. And I got to work with this guy called Ian. Now, Ian had lived in Russia for about 10 years and as a point of pride had never learned a single word of Russian. This did not prevent Ian, however, from getting into screaming rows with Russians who spoke no English. I've never seen anything like it. He was like the Rain Man of beef. It was incredible to watch the man work. One day, it's the morning, I'm at the office. Now, Ian was usually in very early and he wasn't in, so I was like, that's weird. We get a call from the hospital and Ian's in the hospital. Turns out what's happened is, okay, Ian was driving into work and he got involved in a road rage incident. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen any Russian dash cam videos. But if you have, you may be aware that this is not a great idea. Basically, Ian had got out of the car and directed such a stream of like English invective at this guy that the guy had decided the only reasonable course of action was to shoot Ian in the chest with a rubber bullet. And Ian is in the hospital with a fractured sternum. And I'm the real victim here because I have to go, I'm so sorry to hear that. With a completely straight face. The truth is, I did kind of have contempt for Ian, right? Because, like, literally, he learnt nothing from this. The first time he's back in the office, it's like 2 weeks later, he's got his arm in a sling, all that jazz. He comes up to me, and he goes, oh, hello, you know them Russian birds that work down the hall, yeah? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, you know I always say hello to them every morning, yeah? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, this morning I walk past, and I go, hello, and they go, hello, but then they go, Ian, why is it that we're Russian and we're in Russia, and despite that, you always say hello to us in English and not like privyet or whatever in Russian? And I said, because I'm English, so I speak English. And I'm like, the man's had a traumatic injury, okay? Let's go easy on him. And I'm like, well, Ian, for example, okay, we work with Paul, who's French, and even though he's French, he speaks to you in English because that's easier for you. And he's like, yeah, because I'm English, you get it. And I'm not saying that Russian's easy to learn, right? It's not a simple language, okay? One of my first encounters with proper Russian on terra firma Russia was I got off the train from the airport in central Moscow. There was a sign up at the train station, top of the sign. Top of the sign, it says Vнимание in Russian, which is Russian for attention. Underneath that, in English, it says attention. So far, very cosmopolitan. Beneath that, the rest of the sign, written entirely in Russian. Interesting approach to signage. Because the way it reads is sort of, Russians, attention, for you there's a message. Foreigners, just fucking attention. You may not be aware you are currently in Russia. This is quite dangerous. Maybe keep your wits about you or get back on the fucking train. But I had no sympathy for Ian, right? Because Ian had a Russian wife, which is the best way to learn Russian, right? Like, in theory, it's a very complex language, there's lots of grammar going on. You could learn it from a textbook in a classroom. I'm sure some people have done that. But you'll learn the subjunctive a lot faster when Natalia is screaming at you. Believe me, that the necessity is the mother of invention. Here's an example. I don't know if we know each other well enough for this story yet. Let's give it a go. The first time I had sex with a Russian girl, the only time. She turns to me, right, in media res, okay, and she's like, fuck me like a crayfish now. I said what any right-thinking person would do in that situation, which was, excuse me. She just repeats, fuck me like a crayfish, in a tone of voice as though she is confused as to why I'm not already doing it. Now I'm like, you see, the problem here is not that I haven't heard what you said. Arguably, the problem is that I very much have. Because to my mind at that point, there were two possibilities, right? Either fuck her as though she is a crayfish. Don't know how you'd go about that, sir. The way in which I would do that would be to not do it. Or possibility two, fuck her as though I am a crayfish. So I'm now in a sort of Mills and Boon novel being ghostwritten by Franz Kafka. I don't normally carry around a full kind of hair, makeup and costume department with me. Every time I have sex, I don't have sex that often, it'd be a ridiculous overhead. You have to be fucking like a madman for that to make financial sense. She then proceeds to explain to me that like a crayfish is how the Russians would describe the position we call doggy style. Now, I am not a fan of the term doggy style, but I think we can all agree that it makes sense. Because I don't know if you know this, but that's very much how dogs have sex, whereas how crayfish have sex is, I don't know because I'm fucking normal. If you know how crayfish have sex and use it as a descriptor or an analogy, you should be on a list. I don't care which list, but one of them. It was a bit of a mood kill, I won't lie to you. But I tried to get my head around it and I was like, okay, I guess if in Russian you said, fuck me like a dog, it might sound like you wanted them to send you into space. In a way it does make sense. The crayfish never got to go to space, it was a great shame really. But yeah, I quit that job as well. Couldn't really get on with Ian. I'd had enough of Ian, right? So I quit that job, and one of my friends was like, you seem to quit every job that you have after 2 weeks. Aren't you kind of worried that you're going to run out of jobs? I was like, no. Because I'm in Russia, right? Russia is a land of opportunity, right? Okay? You know, like people in the West are sometimes worried about automation, like robots are going to steal their jobs. Okay. No one in Russia is worried about that for two reasons. First of all, there's one job they can never automate, and that is alcoholism. And second of all, Russia is the only country on earth where people are stealing jobs from robots. Allow me to explain this to you with an example. So, once I was at a car park in Moscow. Now, they've got the exit barrier with the machine where you put the ticket, the barrier lifts, you leave the car park, job's a good one. Right, now there is a man in a high-vis vest, and he is sat by the exit barrier. And his job is to take the tickets from the drivers of the cars and then insert them into the machine. And he is looking at that machine like, huh, how would you do this without me? You would take the tickets yourself? Ridiculous, you have no arms. Vitaly is future-proof. And you might look at that and think it's a stupid system, but that's wrong, okay? That is the most genius system ever devised, okay? You've just got to understand what they're actually doing, because that man isn't there to make sure that that job gets done, right? The Russians understand that doesn't need to be done. That man is there serving a higher purpose, okay? That man is there to save society from what else would have happened were such an idiot not kept busy. The Russians have a very clear understanding that it's actually much cheaper to pay that man a salary than it is to clear up after whatever the fuck else he would have done with that free time. Because you can read in a newspaper in Russia, like, a guy in Chelyabinsk drank 4 liters of alcohol hand sanitizer on a Tuesday afternoon and fell off a balcony and crushed some school children to death. And you're like, Pizdzets, how did that happen? And I'm like, I know how it happened. That motherfucker had a day off. Where was his line manager? Those jobs exist to keep people in a given place at a given time in some form of clothing and an approximately sober condition. That is it. It's a full rollout program, okay? You can go into any station of the Moscow metro, and at the bottom of the escalator, there'll be like a little guy in a cabin, and his job is to look at the escalator. There's no emergency stop button in there. There's no phone. If that escalator catches fire, the extent of his duties is to observe the blaze. Like, there was a big fire in the metro today. Did you stay in the box? I stayed in the box. Good job. You never leave the box. You're 90% alcohol. You'd go up like a fucking match. But I got lucky around this time because I bumped into these TV producers. I was doing a gig in English at this bar in Moscow. These TV producers came down, watched my set, came up to me afterwards, spoke to me in Russian, right? They're like, we like that, would you like to be on TV? So I'm like, yeah. It was only after I'd been working with them for some weeks that I found out that neither of those two people spoke any English whatsoever. So to recap, two TV producers had come down and watched me do a set in English, understood none of it, gone, this guy, and that is the basis of my entire career. I don't know what haunts you in your darkest moments, but pretty much that one for me. So on the basis of this, I got into this show called Открытый микрофон, Open Microphone. It was kind of like that American show Last Comic Standing, like a competition, but sort of a Russian version, so like Last Comic Left Alive. And to my surprise, I was kind of like breezing through the rounds of this competition because I had an like illegal advantage, which was that I was a British guy speaking Russian, which no one could believe because every British guy in Russia is Ian. I can't stress that enough. It was a low bar, but I was gallivanting over it. And I kind of got to this point where I'm thinking, like, I've come to this country. I'm now like kind of a successful TV comedian. Maybe I've beaten Russia. Now, this is not a thought you should ever have. 100% of people who've ever thought this thought have ended up shooting themselves in the head in a bunker. I can see some people a little bit on the fence about that joke. We're not, as like mental health discourse made it to Hitler's suicide, is that where we're at? I was sort of under the impression it had been an open season on that guy for a while. Like too many dictators, they bottle it up, don't they? You know? If only he'd had someone to talk to. If only Prince Harry and Ed Sheeran had gotten to him. Maybe it could have been averted. But yeah, so we're filming the show one day, and one of the main producers from the station, who is this guy with like no neck, like built like a sumo wrestler, just comes over to me, slaps me way too hard on the back, and goes, "Stay in Russia, you'll be a fucking star." Which is credit to how Russians, even when being supportive, can be quite threatening. You will stay in Russia, you will be a star, or I will personally have you killed. And we had this break in filming. We decided to go to St. Petersburg for a holiday with some friends. And I happened to be in St. Petersburg on the 23rd of June 2016, which some of you may remember as the day when the British people, in their infinite wisdom, decided to vote for Brexit. Now, we are not going to relitigate that here because it's extremely boring and tiresome. There is one interesting thing about this, which is that on the morning of the 24th of June 2016, I woke up and I found out the result. I was like, fucking hell, here we go, right? And then one of the Russians that we were there with came into my bedroom to congratulate me. And his exact words were as follows: "Congratulations, now your country will be free, like Russia." Two words that fundamentally changed the meaning of a fucking sentence. The Germans try and take the piss about Brexit, like, oh, now in your country everything is fucking shit. It's like, yeah, that's what they want. That's like American nationalists are like, America's the greatest country on earth. If you don't like it, fuck you. British nationalists are like, this country's shit. It's fucking arseholes. It's supposed to be shit. And if you don't like it, you can fuck off. No German could get to me as much as a Russian congratulating me. There were a lot of like very tiresome people at the time who were like, you know, like everything's gone mad now because Trump's been elected and Brexit's happened. It's like, no, those are consequences. Things were mad before this. That's how you get to that. Like, right, if you want to understand when things went mad in the West, you could do a lot worse than September the 11th, 2001. Okay, 9/11, quick recap for those who aren't familiar. First of all, didn't happen on the 9th of November, very misleading. Poor brand awareness. 9th of November, I call that European 9/11. Celebrated every year. Second of all, 9/11, obviously a tragedy, but when we think about it, we often don't acknowledge the true victims of 9/11, Al-Qaeda. Because on September the 11th, 2001, Al-Qaeda, they were young mavericks, they were hungry, sure. They were looking to be taken seriously on the world stage, but they were not looking to be taken that seriously. Right? Their agenda was not for America to go to war with the Islamic world forever. They weren't like, yes, choke me, daddy. That's not what they were going for. If anything, 9/11's caused nothing but arse-ache for Al-Qaeda. In many ways, 9/11 is Al-Qaeda's Iraq war. Thank you. That is the best foreign policy joke you'll get this evening. And I know that because I've written all the others. And I think we can all agree that that's unfair, okay? Because for better or for worse, whether you like it or not, 9/11 was very good terrorism. Terrorism's bad, sure, fine, whatever, be a Lib Dem about it, okay? But if you don't like that, try and name a better terrorism. Oh wait, you can't because there hasn't fucking been one. They crashed passenger jets into the tallest building in the world, twice. The Americans were like, we're gonna build the tallest building in the world, twice, don't ever blow up both. They fucking did! Inside the space of 25 minutes! That's not the IRA blowing up a bin full of dog shit, is it? That is the real McCoy. It's like the Mozart of terrorism. Okay, 9/11 is a lot like Chris Brown's hit song, Yo, parentheses, excuse me, miss. I don't agree with the politics of the guys who did it, or probably their views on women. But you gotta admit it is catchy. And it's weird, right? We're uncomfortable with like the concept of a talented terrorist, but we know that they exist, right? Because we've all seen an untalented one. I own a van and a bread knife, it's jihad time. No. You're embarrassing yourself. This is kind of the Michael Bublé of terrorism, right? This is no good. It's a poor imitation. And it's weird because we're very comfortable with people who are talented at other bad stuff, right? Like Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street guy, right? Talented financial criminal. And now he goes around the world and gives talks about like how you too can be a financial criminal. And like, cool, whatever, but wouldn't a much more interesting talk be how to make jihad and influence people? Eat, slay, love. Would you not go? I'd go. Because I don't know about you, but I feel a certain affinity with Osama bin Laden. Like, as someone who works in the arts, right? Because I get it that, like, you know, in the 90s, right, the wilderness years, people were probably like, Osama, come on, mate. You're living in a cave. You're sharing with 9 other guys. You've got wives and children to support, mate. I mean, maybe terrorism is more of a hobby for you. Have you considered accountancy? But did he listen to them? No. Came back, September 11th, 2001, fuck the haters. Showed them. Osama bin Laden followed his dreams, and for better or worse, that's more than most people have the balls to do. If you're still not on board, there are 2 possibilities. Possibility 1, you simply do not want to acknowledge the achievements of non-white people. That's on you, brother. Option 2, you're smarter than that. I believe in this crowd, right? And you simply know, as I do, right, in fact, that Osama bin Laden was actually the son of a multi-millionaire Saudi construction magnate, and therefore 9/11 isn't quite the rags to riches story that I'm making it out to be. Sadly, even in jihad, the top spots do go to the privileged. Osama bin Laden was, and I realised the irony in saying this, a champagne Islamist. Thank you, that is the best joke in the show. The crowd don't always agree, but it is. It is. Thank you. So we come down from our apartment in St. Petersburg. It's like 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, right, whatever day it was. And there's a guy passed out face down on the pavement and drunk, right? And we're like, same. And then some paramedics show up and we're like, shit, is this guy dead? But they're Russian paramedics. So they come over, they give him a bit of that. And then they start laughing as well. As if just to signal to everyone on the street, don't worry, he's just fucking wasted, continue about your day. Because they have a very different attitude to alcoholism in that country, right? Like, for example, if you were like coming out of your apartment in the morning, right, and you saw a guy in like a tattered suit in a bin drinking meths, you'd be like, that guy has a problem. Whereas in Russia, it's more like, you don't know his story. For 6 months in Moscow, I lived in a building where we had something the Russians call a podyezdny alkash. Now, literally translating, what that means is staircase alcoholic. And if you're wondering what that is, I refer you back to the quite explanatory phrase, staircase alcoholic. It's an alcoholic who lives in your staircase. Does what it says on the tin. Every day I would come home and I would step over this guy on the stairs, who, curiously, would be either sleeping, drinking, or reading the works of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Interesting, isn't it? How it says a lot, right? That Dostoevsky is one of the only authors that a guy who's an alcoholic who lives in a stairwell can read and be like, it could be worse. So every day I step over this guy and he's like, good afternoon. And I'm like, good afternoon. Because staircase alcoholics are extremely polite people. They're the most P's and Q's motherfuckers you're ever gonna meet. Because that's right. The sort of noise a staircase alcoholic might make on the regular. Staircase alcoholics are aware of the precarious position they inhabit. They do not want to become under the bridge alcoholics. They got to stay in there with the residents of the building. So I did this for 6 months, right? And after 6 months, I found out from one of my neighbours that that guy had an apartment on the 6th floor. And he is choosing to eat, sleep, and read Dostoevsky in a concrete stairwell. That's the most Russian shit I've ever seen in my life. A guy who comes home so blasted that he looks at that stairwell like Everest itself. No, we will not reach the summit today. Let us make a small base camp here. Have a sleep. See how I feel in the morning. So while I was working in that, living in that building, I got a job on this other TV show. I got upgraded to a TV show that was imaginatively called Stand Up. Now, while I was working on Stand Up, I got to meet this other comedian called Sergey, who is Ukrainian, and we were kind of both getting a little bit more famous at the same time, right? And it was Sergey who first started calling me Pindos, right, the American. Now, he thought this was very funny. And what you've got to realise is that if you live in Russia and you are from west of Poland, you're fucking American. Just deal with it, it'll make your life a lot easier. I once met a French guy who was American. We all got along very well at the embassy party. Sergey and I, we kind of got on, we were both sort of foreigners in Russia. Things were already sort of slightly heating up with Ukraine stuff at that point. Yeah, Sergey only had one arm, right? He'd been born without a left arm. One day, he loved smoking weed, so we're really stoned. And I'm like, Sergey, what's it like only having one arm? And he turns to me and goes, well, I have only ever had one arm, so I don't know what having two arms is like. So really the question is, what would you do if you had a third arm? Never asked someone from the former Soviet Union a straightforward question. They've had philosophical training, it's dangerous. And he and I were we sort of bonded because we were sharing this experience of becoming more famous, because we weren't that famous, we were like Geordie Shore famous, but that's like more famous than a person should be, okay? Albeit it's not as bad in Russia, because Russia as a country constantly reminds you you're a piece of shit. Whereas if you get famous in the West, that just takes otherwise functioning people and turns them into Ricky Gervais. It's not something that you want. right? He was created by us. He's our own monster. If Ricky Gervais didn't exist, we would have to build him. And the producers of the TV station asked me and him if we wanted to go on a stand-up comedy tour to Siberia. Now, we went, yeah, because we heard, go on a stand-up comedy tour. We should have heard the two more important words in that sentence. To Siberia. There were a few questions we should have asked. For example, what airline are you planning to send us on? Oh, because the people at the TV station decided they would save a little bit of money. And they sent us on an airline called Pobyeda. Now, Pobyeda is the Russian word for victory, and I don't know who named that airline Victory, but they certainly had a sense of humour. Because the victory they had in mind was over the jurisdiction of the International Court of Human Rights. They are firmly outside the remit of Strasbourg down at Pobyeda Airlines. Oh boy. It makes Ryanair look like an orgy of Baroque luxury, not seen since the Byzantine Empire. We show up at the check-in desk with these little rucksack songs. We're going away for 3 or 4 days, right? The woman behind the till is like, are you planning to take these rucksacks with you on the plane? We're like, yep, that's why we brought them to the airport. Well observed. You're a sharp cookie. And she's like, no. The hand luggage is not paid for. Okay, on Pobyeda, nothing is paid for. The ticket is meaningless. You can light a cigarette with it. It really does not matter. I wouldn't have been surprised if the question had been, are you planning to sit inside the plane? No, that is business class. You will be sitting here on the wing. Pobyeda, and I'm not making this up, does actually have business class, which is the weirdest flex in the history of humanity. Just buy a ticket on a better airline. Why do you want to be king of all the poor? Like, I'm in the front of the plane experiencing basically a normal EasyJet flight, while everyone in the back of the plane is being spat on by a guy called Boris from Novokuznetsk, right? That's not a fun journey. We turned to this woman and naively said, what do you mean we have to pay for the hand luggage? And she simply pointed behind her to a big sign that said, you have to pay for the hand luggage. We're like, fair enough, it is on a sign. Beneath that, it enumerated all the things which were banned from hand luggage, one of which was cakes and pies. And you just have to wonder what the incident was that provoked that particular thing. Right, some months after this, I happened to go on a date with a girl who was an air hostess for Pobyeda, right? And that's my kink. And I was like, what's the deal with the cakes and pies thing? And then she was like, those motherfuckers took it too far with the cakes and pies. They were within their rights to ban them. You have no idea. And I'm like, okay. Sorry I asked. But yeah, that was basically my life for 2 years, right? Like traveling around Russia, doing gigs. I learned a lot, right? About, professionalism, comedy, all that kind of stuff. I learned, for example, okay, that if you are booked on the same bill as a striptease act, you should go on first. Because if as a stand-up comedian you go on after a stripper, what you are is a stripper who's telling jokes for some reason. Sure, the cakes and pies bit is fine, but when's he getting his dick out? It's not my preferred energy to work with in a room. And we were kind of enjoying our 15 minutes of fame, right? Except in Russia, it's more like 5 minutes because of the lower average life expectancy. It's pro rata. And we had to keep getting stuff on TV because you got forgotten so fast. And so I had to spend a lot of time with Russian TV producers who had the unenviable task of producing television that would never offend anyone. They were big on censorship, right? But the censorship didn't work in the way that I think people would assume it does. So it was less political and more socially conservative, right? So one of the things they were most aggressive about censoring was swearing. They went on a tear at one point where they were censoring any words which could be construed as swearing. So they were bleeping out stuff like fiddlesticks, which actually made it sound more like swearing, like brain gymnastics. You can't imagine. Now, I don't know if you've ever been told that there's no need to swear. Okay, but I find it fascinating because never has there been a situation where someone's been in the middle of a swearing-filled tirade and someone's gone, there's no need to swear, and they've gone, oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realise there was no need. allow me to continue in Latin. That's never happened. These people are whingers, they don't understand that there's a context for everything that's used, right? Like, if you're calling someone a cunt, for example, you're probably in a heated argument or in a business meeting in Australia. The master of context is the master of the tool. And I love it when people like come up with these lies about it, where they're like, oh, well, I don't mind swearing, but you know, there are children here. We wouldn't want the children to learn to swear, would we? And I'm like, yes, we would. How else are they going to describe how fucked everything is? Climate change is going to cook them to death in 10 years, and you're worried about them learning to swear. That's the only useful skill you can equip them with. They're not going to be doing trigonometry when we're using stone tools to fight over fresh water, are they? The word fuck might stand them in good stead. I think people are just cowards. Like, some people are like, oh, they basically think that like they don't want their kid to learn to swear because then their kid might swear at school and then people will think they're a bad parent. Okay, there's way more fucked up shit your kids can say, right? Like, when my kids are old enough, I don't have kids yet. If I have kids, I'm not going to teach them to swear. I'm going to teach them to say stuff that will damage the other children. Like, some kid's going to call my kid like a gaylord or something, and then my kid's going to be like, well, that's interesting, Jeremy, let's unpack that for a minute, because from your perspective, okay, as a not particularly academically successful, not particularly good looking, not particularly successful in sport or anything like that, representative of a lower middle class family, without the cushion of inherited wealth and connections, all this school is preparing you for, frankly, is a life of drudgery under the jackboot of capitalism. No one's bullying my kid. No one's coming up to my kid. They're not quite sure what he's saying, but they don't like it. That's power. I think people confuse swearing with being mean, and it's not. It's just like an extreme part of language. We use it in extreme situations, right? Someone tells me their like harrowing story of like coming to this country as a refugee, and I'm like, that's fucked up. It's not eloquent, but it's a lot better than, oh golly, what a palaver. It's just not appropriate. The weirdest thing was that a lot of Russians genuinely believed that the worst thing you could do was swear in front of old people, which I always thought was interesting, because how am I going to upset someone who's lived through the most difficult years of the Soviet Union with the word pizdets? He saw it fucking live. Like, what were you saying at Stalingrad if not, well, shit? Probably wasn't like, well, it seems we are surrounded by German tanks, we have 4,000 men, 2 rifles, and we are eating stray dogs to stay alive. Fiddle-dee-dee! What a tizzy we have gotten ourselves into this time. They were just weeks from the space program. I think like that gave me a new perspective on censorship, right? Because like, so I got to know this Russian comedian called Sasha Dolgopolov, who's kind of like a counterculture sort of comedian. And I was running a gig, and once he came to my gig and he did 20 minutes of material about why he thinks feminism is a good thing, which here isn't even stand-up comedy, that's a TED Talk, right? And not even a good one. He got booed for 20 minutes. I don't know if you've ever tried stand-up comedy. You have to work pretty hard to get booed for 20 minutes. If anything, it's a mark of respect. You have at least engaged your audience. And I kind of had a real like epiphany about this, because I remember that lots of Russian comedians would often say stuff to me like, oh my lord, it must be really hard doing comedy in the West because you can't say anything because of political correctness. This is funny for 2 reasons. First of all, in Russia, there is an official list of buzzwords, and if you say them in a certain order, a van comes. And then you're never seen again. Second of all, they have right-wing political correctness, right? I'm not going to be one of these people who's going to be like, this stuff doesn't exist. Like, sure, yeah, like in a lot of cases, if you want a career in a kind of liberal media environment, there's stuff that you can't say about like gay people or black people, and you probably shouldn't, right? But like in Russia, they have that, but it's just you can't say it about like Patriarch Kirill or whoever the fuck, right? Like, it's the same shit, it's just applied to people who deserve protection less. This is very weird because like around this time I got an email because, so basically at this point in the story, 2 people in Zzz's in Salisbury are having one of the worst dining experiences of all time. Like, it's negatively affected the TripAdvisor rating. I don't think they tipped. And this wasn't big news in Russia, right, unsurprisingly. So the first thing I heard about it was I got an email from Her Majesty's Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and it, in précis, right, what it said was, "Dear Milo, as you may be aware, relations between Britain and Russia have gone a little bit spicy this week. So as a Brit in Russia, we would advise you to be careful because things might become a little bit dangerous." Now, I think it belies a general misunderstanding of the sort of Wikipedia summary of the history of the country known as Russia at the Foreign Office, that they're suggesting someone who's been living there for 3 years, that just as of now, things might get a little bit dangerous. Not exactly health and safety conscious. Where were they getting their news about Russia before this? Fucking Первый канал? Like, it's just, the Foreign Office sat there watching like, "Mr. Putin is a great man, and in Kostroma they made the biggest pancake in the world." Fantastic news, we'll email the lads immediately. Like, it was always dangerous. That's why pretty much every Russian I know has a funny story about how a childhood friend of theirs was killed by a falling icicle. That's not a funny story. You have PTSD. Turns out when everyone has PTSD, it really changes the bar for what normal is. "Oh, it's a funny story about how in front of my eyes when I was 9 years old, close friend is killed in a horrific accident. Why do I beat my wife?" Like, you could send every psychologist we have, and it would take them 1,000 years. I think what they were trying to say was people might be more suspicious of foreigners. But again, like I was used to it, right? A while before this, I'd gone to this town called Oryol to do a show. Now, Oryol is about 400 miles from Moscow. It's a very boring, small Russian town. Now, very boring Russian towns have very bored Russian cops. And there's nothing more dangerous than a bored Russian cop. Apart from, as we've learned, any American cop. So, it's me and 3 other comedians. We get off the train from Moscow. Bored Russian cop stood like this on the platform, and he's immediately like, "Documenty." So we come over, we give him our passports, flipping through them. Gets to mine, which is the only foreign one. And he's like, "Ah, what citizenship is this?" And I, like a middle-class white kid who's never been arrested before, said, "You're holding my passport, mate. You tell me." "We are going to the station." So, we go to the little police station in the train station. We're sat there. Now, I was a little bit concerned because the only time previous to this that I'd ever been in a Russian police station was in a slightly different context. So, a friend of mine had bought a car, and we had gone to the police station to register the car because it's a normal country with a functioning bureaucracy. Now, we queued up for like 4 hours. We get to the front of the queue. The policeman is leafing through this like 20-page form, and he's like, "Ah, you're missing one signature here from the former owner of the car." We're like, "Look, his signature's on that document like 15 times. He's not here. We've stood here for 4 hours. What do you want from us?" And he's like, No, don't worry. Of course, you should just forge the signature yourselves." To recap, a Russian policeman is suggesting to me, a foreigner, that I forge a signature on a legal document in a police station under his professional supervision. That is not in the Lonely Planet Guide. We were deciding how we were going to handle this one when a guy who stood behind us in the queue, who I presume was in a hurry, said, "Don't worry, I will forge a signature for you. I'm very good at forging signatures. I do it every day at work." That's what I love about Russians. They have a sense of community. That's what we've lost in this country. So we're in this police station, and what's happening is a series of Russian policemen of increasing rank, which you could tell because the hats were bigger, are asking us the same questions. It's like, "What are you doing in Oryol?" We're like, "We're comedians, we've come here to do a show." And they're like, "A likely story." And we're like, "It's true." And they're like, "We will get to the bottom of this." Another guy would come in, the scene repeats, right? It eventually gets to the point, we are talking to the highest ranking policeman available, the major of the local police. He's like, "What are you doing in Oryol?" We're like, "We're comedians, we've come here to do a show." He's like, "A likely story." We're like, it's true. And he's like, "We will get to the bottom of this." At this point, our booker shows up. He's local, he knows some of the cops, and he's like, "These are my comedians, can you please let them go?" And they're like, No, we are getting to the bottom of this." We're like, we're at the bottom. That's the bottom. You found it. We are convinced that we are going to spend the rest of our mortal existence in this Russian police station. Right? At this point, a very strange thing happened, okay? So me and the comedians are stood against one wall. The cops are stood facing us, and behind them is like the back of the station where the doors to the cells are. Out of the door to the cells comes the smallest policeman I have ever seen in my life. This man was a child. The hat's too big, the jacket's too big. He looked like 9 months old, right? He comes out of the door, locks eyes with me across these other cops, points at my face and goes, "Whoa, it's the English guy from the TV!" You probably think you've experienced silence before, but you've never experienced silence like that. All the senior cops are looking at me, looking at him, back to me, back to him. He interprets this silence to mean, "Please continue with your fascinating story, child." And he's like, "Guys, do you live in a cave? Have you never watched television? It's Smiley Edwards from Stand Up. This guy, Vanya Palavinkin, he is from Comedy Club. What the fuck, do you not recognize them?" Death. Silence. The silence of undiscovered crypts in the Amazon rainforest. The tiny policeman bounds up to this like penalty wall of cops, elbows his way through their knees, grabs me by the front of the shirt and says, "We must make selfie." Now, ladies and gentlemen, I always make time for my fans. It's very important to me, no matter what else is going on. You got to take time out for the supporters. He hands his camera to the major of the police, who does not understand why he's taking this photo. He's doing it out of pure shock. Like, he's being ordered around by some kind of uniformed fetus. So this guy comes up, and he's like down here, right, and he's excited, right? He's like... And I have no idea whether I'm about to be like released, shot, or crowned Miss World, so I'm kind of like... The major of the police then says to me, "Okay, you can go, but never speak of this again." And I'm like, "Sure thing, mate, won't, don't worry." And at that point I was thinking, dogs aren't supposed to go to fucking space. I'm completely out of control in that situation. At the point where you are under arrest and another cop has just recognized you from somewhere, that can go either way. That's like what the Russians would call ordinary roulette. To be fair, people aren't really supposed to go to space either. Here's a fun fact about Yuri Gagarin, right? When he went to space, he was pretty convinced that he was going to die because he knew about what had happened to everyone else. So he was like, "I'm dying for communism, cool, fine, whatever. I'll get a nice plaque." And then he came back alive, and let me tell you, no one was more shocked than that motherfucker. So he's gone from being gonna be dead to the most famous man who's ever lived, gets out of the capsule, they stick a microphone in his face, and I like to think that Yuri Gagarin had not prepared what he was going to say. Because they put the camera up to Yuri Gagarin, and he says, "I went to space and I didn't see God up there." Now, the Soviet propaganda poster makers had to work with what they were given, and they produced what I would conjecture is the greatest propaganda poster in the history of propaganda. It is a picture of the world, and above the world, floating in space, is Yuri Gagarin in his spacesuit, his little red spacesuit, and he's grinning. And above his head, in massive block capital font, it says, "There is no God!" That's metal as fuck! Keep calm, carry on, eat my arsehole. Unreal vibes from that poster. There is no God. Yeah. I decided to leave Russia around this point, partly because of the political situation, also partly because I'd met British guys who'd stayed in Russia too long, right? You do not want to be a 45-year-old British guy desperately explaining to some 20-year-old girl at a bar how cool Euro 96 was. Don't want to be that guy, right? One of my Russian friends was like kind of annoyed at me for leaving, and he was like, if you think the political situation is bad, like don't you think that you're under kind of an obligation to stay here and help put it right? And I was like, no. That's mental. Quick recap on the last guy who was a foreigner who tried to change the political situation in Russia. Bunker, gun, right? Not forgotten about that guy. Like, I care about it. I wish it was better. I hope that it is. In a reasonable way, I'd be happy to try and support that. But it's not a job for your boy, is it? It's a job for years of grinding political attrition led by a guy who really likes Rick and Morty for some reason. But I'm confident that the Russians are going to see off Vladimir Putin because they've already seen off Elon Musk. We all remember Elon Musk, the most divorced man in history. Right, Elon Musk is a billionaire and he has spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to go to space, and he has never been able to personally go to space, and yet he knows that 60 odd years ago in the Soviet Union, tens of homeless dogs went there entirely for free as part of a broadening education program. It's got to annoy Elon Musk. I wrote that on Twitter, and someone who's a fan of Elon Musk, which is another way of saying not had sex, replied to me and said, yeah, well, you think you're so smart, but you do realise those dogs didn't go there using their own money. I do realise that. They're dogs. This guy's clearly not got a good handle on the concept of dogs. He thinks that a Western dog, right, a good capitalist dog, they wouldn't have gone to space on somebody else's dime, no. They've opened up their own small business, wouldn't they? Selling bones or something? Saved up and gone there the honest way. The really fucked up thing though, right, is that those dogs don't even know they went to space. They just think they had a fucked up day and then everyone was pleased to see them. They came out of that capsule like, what, this isn't the fucking vet. Dogs don't have a word for pizdits. I do, not to brag, but I know literally hundreds of words. Glad you've laughed at that. Did that at a gig once and it went down to absolute silence, as though they were sat there going like, all right, Mr. Big Boots with your hundreds of words. Coming down here from London to condescend to this room of pirates, presumably. It's not that many, you should aim for more. Right? And what I've learned studying ancient Greek is, right, that like, you can't, without context, you can never really understand something. Like, to me, the ancient Greeks are the radish guys. I hope they were more than that. I hope that was a fringe activity. But we'll never know, right? To me, they're the radish guys. And so I can tell you this story, right, about a time I had in Russia, but I can't append meaning to it for you, right? You have to do that for yourselves. And what it's made me realize is, right, that I can't control like what's going to survive of me. Right, like, I don't know. Like, all I can hope is that if something is dug up of me in like the far future, that it will be something that devoid of context is still hilarious. So if something is unearthed of me in the year like 2422, that's not how you would say it, it doesn't matter. I want it to be this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Open Wide Weapons. Good night!